Well, welcome back. I'm pleased to have you again. Today I would like to speak about toxic masculinity, a topic that I think is fairly familiar with a lot of people, one I've never really addressed, but one I think I can address. And to do so, I would like you to take a look at the following.
We listened to each other's point of views. Sometimes I was wrong and would learn that I was wrong, and sometimes I was right. And it was incredible to not be around toxic masculinity, to get a little break from it. And we would always, it did always just kind of make us laugh about how we are, how we ended up with the, women shouldn't be in roles like this because we're just so emotional. And we're just, and it's just, I've worked with Bryan Singer. I've seen emotional men. The biggest hissy fits I've ever seen thrown on set. I've watched a man. She's, I think, my third female director, and they are the calmest, best decision makers I've ever worked with. I absolutely love working with female directors.
Now, fascinating. When I saw the video the first time, I was amused. I was intrigued. I found it funny, but not necessarily in a positive way. I found it funny from the perspective of how bad things have got and how bad things really are. And let me start by making the following statement. If you are a woman, I'd like to know whether you found any issue on face value with the short clip before you listen to my position. Similarly, if you are a man, I'd like to know, leave in the comment section, if you found any issues with the clip. I'll speculate for a second, and I would say about 90% of women would see nothing and certainly saw nothing wrong with the conversation. I would also wager that about 65 to 70% of men would have seen nothing wrong with the conversation. At this point in time, before you listen to what I have to share, you can stop this video, go back, listen to the same clip again, but this time have the mute button on. It's a subtitled video, and just pay attention and read the words. The words that are spoken were translated. Just read the words and see whether it changes the perspective that you had the very first time. Now, should you choose to, again, go back, listen to the words at the same time as you read the words, having had a better context, and pay attention to the other people who were on the round table and their responses. What we have here is a classical example of how bad things have got, especially within the male-female interaction and dynamics. I don't believe in toxic masculinity. I think it's in my opinion, is an idiotic reference. I don't believe in toxic masculinity for a number of reasons. In the West, it's only in the West that women can refer to men as toxic. Toxic masculinity is the same as depression, and it's the same as, I put it in the same category as feminism. These are first world problems. Abraham Maslow talked about a hierarchy of needs. Once you go beyond your basic safety, security, food, shelter needs, and move into the next stage, psychological needs, people start to forget about the importance of men and the importance of what we bring to the table. Go to Africa, go to poorer countries, go to second and third world countries, go to countries where you have very bad actors and players, and a lot of the attributes that men have that are called toxic are the same attributes that women crave for protection, for provision, for safety, comfort, for a number of reasons. In the West, we have socialized the West so much so that for most people, generally, in the UK, for example, we take for granted sacrifices made by our forefathers to ensure that we have a civilization where people can get along peacefully. We've outsourced most of those responsibilities that most men were responsible for, protection. We've outsourced that to the police, the Navy. We've outsourced that to the legislators and those who pass judgments, the judiciary. As a result of that, you can even go a step further and say we've outsourced responsibility that belongs to some men. Now we have a surrogate husband, the nanny state, to provide for women who want to be without men or have children out of wedlock. They can be provided for by the state. So the need for a man and the basic protection provision that we provide is snared at and is not really appreciated. But that is the West. It's part of life. As a result of that, what we've found is there's certain attributes that men have, and we've always had, and we will always have, despite the madness in the West. Those attributes have come under assault. Strong men are seen as toxic. People don't understand that hard times, difficult times, pain, struggle is what creates strong men. A separation of men who will pay the price, sacrifice for the greater good of the community and their family. When men attain what they desire, those strong men will create a peaceful environment, a good time for the whole society. And therefore, we move from the basic level of Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs to the next level, which is we don't need security, we don't need shelter, we don't need food. So we can talk about feelings and psychological issues. As soon as we move to the next level, what we have is we're in what we call good times. Those good times will dilute the strength of most men and will produce weak men. And as we move further up into self-actualization, those weak men will multiply and they will create unfortunate and bad times. It takes a long while before the pendulum comes back and we realize that we need strong men. Now, Ukraine, for example, at the start of the altercation with Russia, was a useful reminder that we need the men. The same strong men, toxic men, aggressive men, disagreeable men, all men were asked, the country needs you. Women and children, you can leave the country. You're safe. All men, we forbid men from leaving the country. You must stay and fight and defend and protect. Give your life for the future of the women and the children. A lot of the men did not have children, did not have a family, but yet they were asked to die for the families that they did not have. We didn't call it toxic. We call them heroes. Across the whole world, everyone was carrying flags of the Ukrainian territory, esteeming them as good people, people who believed in their nation state and fought hard and successfully for their nation state. No one to call the men toxic. On the opposite side were the Russians. The men were recruited, the reserves were called forward. Men were told, because you had signed to join the army, and even if you didn't sign, we're calling you forward. You don't have a choice. You're going to go and die for Mother Russia. Women were not afforded or extended such courtesy. In Russia, they were not called toxic men who were going to fight for the nation. The point I make, and I digress, but the point I make is to say, these are first world problems. Once we've attained shelter, food, clothing, once our psychological needs are met, once we start going into the field of happiness and blissfulness and self-actualization, we condemn the same men that created the infrastructure, that afforded us the opportunity to bask in our pleasures. Toxic masculinity is simply a joke. And you can see that the joke is on you, the men, by the video that I had you watch. And let me address a few things from the video. My observation of the video, and generally speaking, of modern women, especially those who use the word toxic masculinity, that word is used by women who cannot hold a logical conversation. They can't debate, they can't argue based on facts and principles and statistics and data. They can only argue based on feelings. And they want you to understand their feelings. And if you can't relate to feelings, because feelings are not things you can see, then you're branded toxic and aggressive. Women want you to be able to inductively and deductively understand how they feel even before they speak. Men are not like that. We are logical, we're rational, we are cost-benefit calculators. We begin from the end in mind and we work backwards. That's our frame. The reason we are that way is because we are genetically designed and we have evolved to understand cost, benefits, risks, and therefore we think in those ways. We do not run our logic through our emotions. Women do that. Now, this does not make women inferior. It just means we are different. We put our positions and our points across. We don't hold you to the same standards as ourselves, but we just simply expect you to be able to put across your point without using any form of shaming language, without using any form of pejorative statements, without using words to devalue our position and our experience. The male journey, and I have said this before, is something that women will never understand. Maybe I will speak to that later. As a man, you should never try to explain the male journey. We are born. We are born with potential. Everyone. But we're not born the same. Men are created or born with potential and potential only in an uneven world. The physical attributes that we have as men do not really enable us achieve the success we need. They might enhance the possibility, but generally speaking, society judges us based on what we produce, what we create, and the value we bring to the marketplace. Women are not judged by the same standards, and in my opinion, rightly so. A woman is judged based on her intrinsic characteristics, primarily, especially the younger she is, youth, beauty, and attractiveness, primarily speaking. The inherent values a woman has is gifted to her. The inherent values a man has is gifted to him. But the man's value is not a useful currency of exchange in the marketplace, especially in the dating marketplace. But also in the marketplace of economics and society, none of that matters. Men simply ask each other, we have a hierarchy. What can you produce? What have you achieved? What problems can you solve? What demons can you fight? And who will be willing to go? Those who take a step forward are rewarded based on their contribution. That is how we judge ourselves as men. We don't judge ourselves based on who looks the best, or who is the tallest, or who is the necessarily has the best frame. We judge. Go back to the hunter-gatherer days. Who has wisdom? Who has physical strength? Who has experience? Who has seen things and therefore can protect the community? And whose leadership should we follow? In other words, who is the best leader? Women can have the luxury of being just attractive and therefore being judged based on their looks alone, and therefore never develop the ability to think, reason, never develop rationality, never go out to the marketplace and ask the marketplace, what do you want? A woman's only agency, primarily speaking, the younger she is her sexuality, her beauty, her youth, her attractiveness. Now this brings me to the word toxic masculinity and who uses such words. In your personal life, take a poll, and if this was possible, take a poll back 10 years ago. If you go back 10 years ago, that word was used by women who had gone past their sell-by dates. I say that unapologetically, and I say that because it is true. A woman's agency and generally beauty last about 12 years, 18 to 30, and then it's a free fall. There is a decline in beauty because biology plays its, like I say, orchestra. It plays its music. Between 30 and 35, a woman has to make the most important decisions. 35, your geriatric pregnancy, that means, therefore, your reproductive fertility value declines significantly. Most of the quality of the eggs you have and the quantity is gone. That's biology. Women who used and branded the word toxic masculinity were women who were usually 35 years and above. Women who had just entered into menopause, and they could see men of the same age still having the ability to attract women who were half their age and just as young as their daughters, but who were succeeding. They were doing very well. They were inspiring people. And in the sexual marketplace, they were still able to achieve what they wanted, which is younger, hotter women. And so the name calling started. The use of the sign language began. In any case, the point of this is to say, when you meet women who are 22, 23, in the prime of their beauty, they don't use the reference to toxic masculinity. They don't. The reason is simple. All is fair in love and war. To the victor goes the spoils, and women who are 22, 23, 21, that range, if you're beautiful, you have youth, if you're attractive, your primary agency is your beauty. A woman who is 23 and very attractive in the sexual marketplace has a much higher value than a man who has 7 million in his bank account. That's how much we will pay for beauty, and hence the term the virgin's price. Now let me bring this back to the clip you just saw. Toxic masculinity, when used by women, is used, and let me use Jennifer Lawrence's words. There were times when I was wrong, and she accepted that. But there were times when she was right. In other words, when the woman feels that she is right, and the man says, I don't think you're right, not agreeing with her means you're toxic. In other words, her feelings triumph over your facts, your logic, whatever statistics you put forward, and whatever rational explanation you bring to the table. If you do not agree with me, you're toxic. If you do not conform to how I expect you to behave, you're toxic. If you're not emotional, as a woman should be, if you're not feminine enough, if you stay in a masculine frame, you're toxic. Also, if you do not agree to the terms of modern dating, partnership, where we can sit down and we can agree on things in a democratic way, What are we going to eat? I don't know. What would you like? I don't know. And we go about this for 15, 20, 30 minutes. You're toxic if your first answer is, well, I like to have some Italian food, and we're going to the restaurant next to the high street. The fact you've made a decision, you're toxic. Toxic masculinity has been what has been used to castrate, and I don't mean this literally, but to castrate most men into submission, into not competing. We've used it to castrate men and to force men into a corner. And men have generally agreed to those terms. Why? Men crave the adoration of women, the affirmation of women, the praise. We crave the touch of women. We crave the presence of women. So it's a coping mechanism. Men who cannot compete and men who perhaps are indifferent to the woman's presence have found a way to still get some of the spoils. They can't compete with other men in the hierarchy. So men who cannot compete have accepted that the best way for them to still have some of the spoils is to behave like women, to accept to the terms that women who can no longer compete are bashing around. So today, younger women are starting to use the word toxic masculinity. And when you ask them the question, what does it mean? Most young women cannot define toxic masculinity. They use words such as he's controlling. Well, and this brings me to a conversation about standards. Modern men these days are not expected to have standards. We're not expected to have preferences. We're not expected to have rules and decorums about how you associate with us. We are not expected to have any say in what we think is acceptable in our world and what is not acceptable. If you don't accept a woman's journey, her past, her lack of logicality, her being too emotional, if you do not accept the fact that she cannot articulate how she feels, despite being the only one who is feeling that way, then you're toxic. Men do not have standards. There is a double standard in everything in life. Let me go back to the clip and I'll pick up a few things. She begins by saying that there are times when she is wrong, but she says that I accept it. But she gloats in being right. Now, as I explain that clip, I'd like you to reverse the roles and imagine a round table of men. And the man says, when I'm wrong, when I speak to the missus and I'm wrong, I accept it. But when I'm right, I'm the don, I'm the man, I'm right. And then we go on to explain that we've worked with other female directors and film producers who are way too emotional. And all the men laugh so loud. And then we go on to say, by the way, I really, really enjoy male filmmakers and male directors. I prefer working with them. They're just so much, much better. Any man who said that will be cancelled. In the modern West, any man who says that will be cancelled immediately. Can you see the double standard? We would be branded if we made such a statement as being sexist, misogynistic, hateful of women, out of control, toxically masculine. We would be called all the names. We will be subject to the shaming tactics of the modern woman. Anger, a lot of anger will come our way. Shame, as you saw from the video clip, we will be shamed beyond belief. We'll be insulted. We'll be guilted into apologizing, withdrawing that statement, and potentially bowing to the mob and resigning to whatever role or movie that we are producing. In all of this, you would find women apply something that I call the need to be right, as you saw in this video. Now let's flick back to the original script. It's okay when she's wrong, and it's not a big deal. But when she's right, she tells you the world has to stop and bow to the fact that she is right. Now, what I found fascinating, she goes on to say that she's tired of being around the toxically masculine environment, which simply says, I want you to agree to all of my terms. That is what toxic masculinity is. When used by women against men, it simply means agree to all my terms. Don't be a man. I want you to be sitting down. As a matter of fact, I like you to, if you can change those things down there so it looks more like a woman's, even better. But whip it out when I need to ride it. But after that, just put it back. I like you to accept all of my terms. Then you're not toxic. When used by women, it's simply, if you have a perspective that is different from a woman's, then you're toxically masculine. When used by men, and I have seen this, these are used by weak men who were raised by mothers, usually single mothers, feminized into thinking there's something wrong about being a men who cannot compete with other men who are more feminine than they are masculine, men who, for some reason, felt that they were dealt a bad hand. For example, the man is short, and in the presence of other tall men, there's this feeling of hatred. The man is not good looking, and therefore when he sees good looking men who actually benefit from the double standards of beauty, they're very angry. Men who cannot compete have latched onto these words and have been rebranding and putting it out there. Well, here's one for sure. I've never had men around me use the word toxically masculine. It will not be accepted. Now, let me come back to the clip. And I'd like you to draw your attention to something that I thought defines how we see society today. When Bryan Singer was brought up, I'd like you to pay attention to how the women laughed. Now, this is a successful film producer and a director. If it were not for the fact that this was being recorded, I bet you those women would have been rolling on the floor in stitches. You could see some of them were controlling themselves so hard. Now, I even laughed. There's something about seeing someone giggle or laugh that makes me laugh. That's just my nature. But there was a fascinating observation. If the cameras were not there, they would have been rolling on the floor in stitches, laughing uncontrollably. They control themselves. But despite all of that control, you can see all of the women found it funny. In other words, the double standard, the cognitive dissonance. In one sentence, you can criticize men for being toxic. In the next breath, you can actually do the same thing. You criticize men for what we do, and then you do the same thing to men, and that is acceptable. Not just acceptable. It's so funny that every woman thinks this is correct, this is right. Can you see the double standard and how the whole reference to toxic masculinity is simply a fake? It doesn't exist. Now, I shared this video to make a few points. A lot of young men these days have been forced into believing that there is something wrong with them. There is something benign, there is something unattractive about having a male frame. I want to say there's nothing wrong with you. And if you stick to your frame, which you should as a man, the women you come across will use the shaming language, anger, shame, insult, guilt, and the need to be right. You can see in that clip, you saw anger, frustration, You saw shaming. You saw insult by referencing Bryan Singer. You saw guilt. And finally, the need to be right. Of course, women are more superior. In one sentence, we shame men for not accepting that men and women, as she says in her words, women can't play certain roles. In one word, in one sentence, she says, well, we shouldn't be sexist. In the next breath, she says, oh, female directors are much better than male directors. Now, I'm not questioning her experience. I really don't believe that that is necessary. I think anyone can choose what they wish. It's the double standard in the social lexicon. It's the double standard in the decorum, in the conversation, in the public interaction. Certain women will listen to what I've said so far and find offense in what I've said, despite offense not being given. They will take offense. They will take offense at the same thing. Men cannot have preferences, we cannot have standards. A man says, I like women who are youthful, attractive. I like women who have a low body count, who have not had so many sexual partners. I like women who are traditional in their mannerisms, who were raised in a two-parent family, who are agreeable, and who have traditional values. 9 out of 10 women who hear such a list of preferences will say in response, oh, you want a slave. Oh, you want a woman who you can brainwash. Oh, you must be a pedophile. A standard that a man has, a preference that we have, is attacked. The women who will do that attacking, usually, generally speaking, are never in the same category of women that I just described. Attractive women wouldn't bat an eyelid. Youthful women do not bat an eyelid. Women who are agreeable, who have traditional values and training, agree. The ones who attack the male's preferences are those who have gone past their sell-by date or who have disqualified themselves by their actions. So, in order to shame you, the man, into not having a preference, into accepting them in society, despite having a much lower mate value, they'll call you names. They'll use shaming tactics. And if you try to argue and defend your position, they would insist that you were wrong and you're toxically masculine. Now, gather a group of men, 20, and have an attractive woman, a few of them, and go one after the other and ask, what would you like as a minimum in the man of your dreams? Sometimes you might need a few more pages to be able to capture what they tell you. He has to have the 4 sixes, 6-inch, 6-pack, 6-figure bank account, 6 feet tall. That's one. What else do you want? Well, he has to be of a certain quirk. He has to have humor. He has to be cultured. He has to have the right manners. We'll keep writing it down. What else do you want? Well, whilst he might have a 6-inch, he has to be able to use it to perfection. So you want a professional porn star? Well, not a porn star. I want him to have the abilities of a porn star, but not the body count of a porn star. I don't want him sleeping with so many women in the past or in the present or in the future, but I want him the performance. Okay. And how old do you want him to be? Well, about my age. How old are you? Well, I should be 24 next year. So you want a mate of similar age, someone who is still in or just finished college, to have all of these attributes? And she said, yes. Okay. The men look around the table and they say, well, is there any tolerance in that age group? Well, 24, maybe up to about 30. Men simply say, okay, that is what you want. And what is fascinating about the male journey and the male struggle is that we calibrate. We listen to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 women within our community, and we look at ourselves and say, damn, in order to attract that woman or to attract the potential mate, I've got to work. We educate ourselves, we learn, we find entrepreneurial activities, both economically and in performance. We do everything. We go, we study, we learn how to please a woman, we learn how to tell jokes, we go to classes if we need to. We do everything to study women to make sure that we are what they want when we meet them. In other words, we do not criticize a woman's standards and her preferences. We simply say, that is what you want. It's up to me to become the best version of myself to be able to attract you or for you to find me attractive. We do so because that is the nature of the game. We don't shame you. We don't apply anger. We don't insult you. We don't try to guilt you into saying, why wouldn't you just accept me? I'm a bum. I have nothing. I still live with my parents. Just take me as I am. Take me on potential. And we don't even force you by arguing in trying to be right. We just simply say, this is the playing field. This is what you want, women. You're the gatekeepers to your womb. You're the gatekeepers to your body. You're the gatekeepers to your emotions. And I want access to each and all of those, beginning from the latter, your emotions, your body, and hopefully your womb. So we go back and we say, I'll be back. 4 or 5 years down the line, we come back and we knock on the same door and we say, here I am. We accept the preferences that women want. We do not label women. I've never met a man who labeled a woman as toxic. In order to understand how severe that word is, you have to go just beyond the dictionary definition in a dictionary. You have to go beyond that. Toxically masculine is almost the saying that you're pure evil. The use of the word is so disingenuous and so wrong that it causes the man's ego, self-esteem, self-concept to be under assault. So effectively he caters. It's the same as being someone calling you a pedophile. Your initial response is shock. That shock causing you as a man not to speak. Because how do you start to defend being accused of being a pedophile, whereas you've never had such an inclination or history? The first feeling is to be shocked. It's the same as when you're called and labeled a racist, especially if you're white or lighter colored. It's a shock to your system. You don't even know where to start because you can't argue against something you are not. Being called toxically masculine and women who use such words are evil, especially when such words are used and branded without evidence, without any concrete history of such actions being put forward. In that video, you saw Jennifer Lawrence being sexist. In my opinion, you even saw a little glimpse of misandry, a word that most women do not know, have never heard. Every day in the papers, on the TV, we hear 2 words from women: misogyny and sexist. These are labels that men have been given. You never hear men say back to women, well, some of your statements are actually sexists and misandrous. Men simply, we take it on the chin and we move forward. That has to stop. This is the time. A time has come where the pendulum has swung too far to the left. You need to bring it back to the center. And how do you do that as a man? Don't entertain such accusations. You don't explain the male journey, but don't entertain such accusations. If people will use words without consideration, without evidence, without proof, and carelessly use the same words back. When you start calling people names and you simply explain, well, if this is a name calling experience, I do the same thing. I've said to people before, if someone calls you sexist, pick the next word, pedophile. Call her a pedophile. Let's see, it's a race to the bottom. The point is to shock her system, because then what it causes her to do is to stop and say, I'm not a pedophile. And you say, yes, you are. The shock to her system and on her face will be so vivid. And then you can say, the feeling you had just now when I used that word, which I have no evidence to prove, would you wish that on yourself every day or on your daughters? The answer is always no. Then, respectfully, please could you stop using toxic masculinity towards me without evidence, without any history, without any data, without any facts. If we're going to call ourselves names, no problem. After all, men and women are equal. So, in my conversation with you, the woman, I should speak to you like I would a man. I hope that didn't go over your head, a woman. If men and women are equal, then if I treat you, the woman, in any way, chivalry, like a princess, like a lady, that is being sexist. After all, I don't treat men in the same way. If I open the door for a man, I should open the door for a woman. But if I don't open the door for a man, believing he's got two hands, then I should not open the door for a woman. The double standard of choosing the benefits when women want and shunning the responsibilities when they choose is the reason why we're having societal issues amongst the sexes. We're either equal under the law, equal in rights, equal in availability of opportunities, and therefore deserve equal treatment, or we're different. And if we are different, then perhaps, and it's my nature, to be chivalrous, to be a gentleman, to have the necessary decorums of a man, not because the woman is inferior, but simply because that is part of one's training and upbringing. Hidden in that is not about superiority or inferiority, it's more that I recognize your uniqueness as a woman, and I'm showing you honor as a result of being unique. Yes, you can open the door yourself. Yes, you can go out and carry your bags. Yes, all of that. But from a societal perspective, I view my role to society and to the community as not just being a role I provide to myself. And therefore, out of courtesy, there are certain behaviors as a man that I will exhibit. Now, this brings me to today's conclusion, which is, men, we stray from our frame when we start to pursue things that are not supposed to be part of our responsibility. Provision, protection. The priest, the prophet, and the pursuer. 5 roles of a man. Provision, protection, priest, prophet, pursuer. The first 2 are critical, protection and provision. If you get that right, you started on the right path. Then you have to be the priest, the person who's more like the spiritual head of the family, the person who washes and cleanses the unit with his words. And that means your morals, your values, your principles have to be deserving of you being the teacher, you being the person who brings forward a pathway of moral righteousness for the entire family. A prophet is someone who effectively, and you might say, through knowledge, experience, is able to see in advance. This is purely why I primarily do not tolerate men who are looking for 50-50 partnerships from women. No, your role is to be the leader. You go ahead like the men in Ukraine, you stay back and die for the family. Being a prophet means you're able to see in advance and recognize there's trouble brewing. The water will be troubled. I'm going to package my loved ones, my family, and put them on a boat and ship them away in advance of the enemy arriving. That's a prophet. You simply communicate things that could happen, the foreshadowing of things that could happen. And that means you have to be wise, you have to be intelligent, to be able to discern things that could be happening in the immediate future or in the far future. A pursuer is someone who actually has a vision. The idea that two people are driving a plane is unheard of. A woman who does not want you to be in a leadership position, it's not for you. It's really that simple. She can find someone else who's a beta male or simp for a 50-50 partnership. Responsibility lies with you, the man, provider, protector, priest, prophet, pursuer. A pursuer is someone who sees. Can you develop a vision? This is where we are going as a family, as a unit, and these are the reasons. This is the vision statement. This is the mission statement. These are the values we have as a family. This is the principles. This is the strategy. These are our goals. This is the plan on a daily basis. These are the habits we need. There is space for spontaneity, but to get to the vision, to get to the mountain top, this is the vision. And for men, let me say this very clearly. Your role is not to give your vision to the woman and let her alter the vision. She can either buy into the vision or she can exit stage left. Two cannot walk together except they agree. It's only been in the last decade that we've started to see titles in businesses like co-CIO, co-CEO. The reason for such is simply because the original business founder created a very unique cooperation or business. Got to the point where they wanted to retire and they could not find one person who they trusted to take on the responsibility and their legacy. So to ensure that it was not in the hands of the wrong person, they diversified. They appointed two people playing the same role. Now, I don't know how you can legislate the most important decisions by the democratic vote. Doesn't happen. It shouldn't happen under your watch as a man. Now, I hope that has been useful.